Hi guys, today we're going to go over parallel and perpendicular lines. Just a little review from algebra. So for parallel lines, we always have the same slope. For perpendicular lines, we have opposite signs. So we're going to switch the sign. If it's positive, we're going to make it negative. If it's negative, we're going to make it positive. And reciprocal. That means that the numbers are going to switch. So perpendicular lines have opposite sign change and reciprocal slopes of each other. So if the two lines are perpendicular, the product of the slope is 1 every single time. So we're going to practice. I'm going to look at this table here on the right, the one that I am underlining. We're going to look at this slope bank, and we're going to have the original slope. We're going to fill in this graph right here. I am giving you the original slope. I'm going to find the parallel slope, and I'm going to find the perpendicular slope, all from the slope bank. So if my slope m equals a divided by b, we said that parallel lines have the exact same slope. So a parallel line that has slope of AB is going to be right here, A over B, because parallel lines always have the same slope. Now if I have a perpendicular line, we said we're going to switch the sign. So my original is positive, my perpendicular slope has to be negative. I know that much. And we're going to do the reciprocal. That means I'm going to flip it. I'm going to switch them. So if the A is on the top, it's going to come to the bottom. If the B is on the bottom, it's going to come to the top. So my slope should be negative BA. Let's look at problem number 2. For number 2, I have a slope of negative 1. Remember that if you have a whole number, we can always put a 1 underneath it to make it into a fraction. So if my slope is negative 2 over 1, I'm going to look at my slopes here on the slope bank, and the one that matches for my parallel line, because it has to be the same, is negative 2. Okay, remember parallel lines must have the same slope. Now for perpendicular lines, remember the sign switches. If it was negative, now it's going to be positive. And the 1 goes to the top and the 2 goes to the bottom. So I'm looking for a positive 1/2, and we have it right here. That is going to be the perpendicular slope of negative 2. Let's move on to the next one. The next one is 2/3. I'm going to look for the parallel slope first. Remember, it must be exactly the same. So we have it here, 2/3. That's my parallel slope. My perpendicular slope has to be negative. So that's the first part, negative. And we're going to switch them. The 2 goes to the bottom, the 3 goes to the top. So my slope is going to be negative 3 over 2. And finally, a slope of 0. So let's talk about a slope of 0. Slope of 0 is going to be a line that is horizontal. That would be a slope of 0. So a line that is parallel to a slope of 0 is going to be the same thing, the slope of 0. Now let's talk about the perpendicular one. If I have a horizontal line, a line that will be perpendicular to a horizontal line will be a line that is vertical. Okay, a vertical line would be perpendicular to a horizontal line. Horizontal always has a 0 slope. My vertical line, on the other hand, is going to have an undefined slope. Therefore, our answer for perpendicular is going to be an undefined slope. Okay. I hope this helps. Let's move on to the next section, guys. I'm going to delete this so that we can move on. For the second part, we have two equations, it says, are the following lines parallel, perpendicular, or neither? So what we have been focusing on is just the slope. Our y-intercepts can be different. The only thing that has to be the same are our slopes. So if I'm looking for a parallel line, always look for the slope. Remember that the slope is the number that goes with the x. So 2x and 2x are exactly the same number. So I'm going to say that they are parallel lines. And if you guys do not trust me, we can always use our calculators. So I can have my calculator right here, and I'm just going to double check because you may not trust your teacher. So let's just double check. We go to y equals, I plot my first equation, 2x minus 5. Press enter, get to your next equation, and we're going to press 2x plus 3. We're going to graph them, and there you go, there's your proof. We have two parallel lines. Let's continue. So now for the next one, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to look at my slope. Okay, remember that if we do not have a number on the bottom, so if I have a whole number, I can always put a 1 underneath it. So let me just erase this really quick. That's my slope, so I'm going to put it over 1 because there's no number there. So I'm going to check. They're not the exact same, so they're not parallel. I know for perpendicular they must be opposite signs, so that's true. The first equation is positive, the second one is negative. Now I need to check to see if the numbers switch, if they're reciprocals. So the 1 came down, the 2 went to the top, so I'm going to say these are perpendicular lines. Okay. Now for the last part, notice there's a difference here. The y is not by itself, our equation is not in y equals mx plus b, so we're going to have to solve for y. So I'm going to solve for y for my first equation. I want to leave the y by itself, so I'm going to move the 3x. So I'm going to do minus 3x. Remember, whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. They cancel out here, bring the y down, and I have a negative 3x plus 8. That's my first equation, and I know that my slope for this one is going to be 3x because it's the one that has, it's the number in front of the x. Now let's solve for x for the other equation, for the y, I'm sorry, for the y. So I'm going to move the 6x because I need to leave the y by itself. So I'm going to do plus 6x because whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. I still have the 2y right here, and on the other side I have 6x plus 16. Remember, we cannot combine them because the 6 has the variable x and the 16 does not. The last thing I need to do to leave y by itself, to isolate the variable, is to divide everything by 2. So I'm going to divide every single number by 2. Cancels out. So my final answer is y equals 6 divided by 2 is 3. I keep my variable x, and then 16 divided by 2 is going to be 8. My slope for this equation is 3x. Does it fall under any of the categories? Is it parallel? Does it have the exact same number? No, I don't think so. One has a negative, one has a positive, so it's not parallel. What about perpendicular? Remember, for perpendicular they have to have opposite signs. So yes, they do have opposite signs, but they're still the same number. They did not do the reciprocal. The 3 did not go to the bottom, the 1 did not go to the top. So therefore my answer for this question is going to be neither. Be really careful with those guys. Going to move down to the next section. It says writing the equation of a line that is parallel or perpendicular to another equation. Get the line given and slope-intercept form. Take the correct slope from the given line. Write the equation of the new line using the slope and the y-intercept that you found. So let's move on to the next page. So right here, for practice 1, we have write the equation of a line and slope intercept form that passes through that point and is parallel, that's key, parallel to 2x minus y equals 6. So as we talked before, I need to have my equation in slope intercept form. So I am going to solve for y. I want the y to be by itself, so I'm going to move the x to the other side. I'm going to do minus 2x minus 2x. To cancel it out, I still have a negative y right here. Please do not disappear the negatives. And we bring down the negative 2x plus 6. Because the y is negative and I want to get rid of it, I am going to divide everything by a negative 1. So my final answer is y equals, then we have negative 2 divided by a negative 1 is a positive 2x, plus I have a 6 over a negative 1, so that's going to be a negative 6. That's my equation. Our step said, have your equation in slope-intercept form. It's already in slope-intercept form. And we're going to find our slope. The slope that I'm going to be working with is 2. If a line is parallel to it, parallel means the same slope. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a line that is parallel to this one. So I already know that my equation is going to start with a 2x. I just have to find the y-intercept next. For your test, you guys are going to have multiple choice. So all you guys have to do is you guys are going to match one of your multiple choice that has the 2x. As your slope, you're going to put it in y equals. You're going to put it in y equals. And I'm going to give you guys an example here. Both of them have 2x. So I'm just going to keep one so you guys don't get confused. That way you know what we're doing. I have 2x minus 5. I am going to go to my table of values. So I'm going to press the blue button, then table. And I'm going to see which one has a point of negative 6, negative 9. So I'm going to move to negative 6. This one has negative 6, negative 17, so that would not be my answer. And that's how you guys are going to check every single one of your answer choices. Okay. Let's move on to the next section. Okay, so they're telling me to plot the points. I'm going to plot point A, negative 1, and negative 3. Point A is at negative 1, negative 3, so right here. Then it says, I don't know if you guys can really see it. Negative 1, negative 3. They're not going to be perfect. And B is at 0. When x is 0, then y is going to be negative 4. When x is 2, y is going to be negative 2. And when D is 1, y is going to be negative 1. So right there. So they say Plot the points below and join the points from A to D in order. So we have A right here. We have B right here. We have C and we have D. Just join them in order. There we go. What is the slope of AD? Remember that when we have a graph, I can find the slope by doing rise over run. Also remember that if my line is going this way, that means I'm going to have a negative slope. So that one would be a negative slope. This one would be a negative slope. Also remember that the ones that go to the right or up are going to be positive slope. Positive slope. Don't ever forget that. So when we have a graph, remember that we get 2 points and we're going to do rise over run. So we always do rise over run to find the slope. Rise over run means that the top number tells me how many units you move up or down. And the denominator tells me how many units I move to the sides, right or left. Okay, so if I'm looking first for the slope of AD, I'm going to start here and I'm going to go here, so I'm going to count how many units I moved up and down. So I moved 2 units up and 2 to the side. It's a positive slope, so that means that I have a 2 over 2. If I put it on the calculator, if I put 2 over 2, not 5, to 2, it gives you a 1. So my slope is a positive 1. Now let's look at the slope of BC. So BC, I have 1, 2, 1, 2. So the same, rise 2, run 2, so my slope is a positive 1. What is the slope of AB? The slope of AB is 1 over 1, rise 1, run 1, but now it's a negative 1 over 1, so my slope is a negative 1. For DC, my slope is the same, so I have a negative 1 over 1, so that's a negative 1 slope. What is the slope of AB? We said negative 1. What is the slope of BC? BC is a positive 1. What is the slope of AD? Positive 1. DC, negative 1. What can you say about the slopes of AD and BC? So let's look at that. My slope of AD is 1. My slope of DC is a negative 1. Therefore, I can say they're opposite signs. We're switching them. So I'm going to say the lines are going to be perpendicular. Now, because I have a 2 over 2 and a 1 over 1, that doesn't change the fact that my final answer is a 1. So you're always going to compare your simplified slope, not the original rise over run. You're comparing always your simplified slope, because I can also go back to my graph and I can go and look right here and from A to D, I can also move 1, 1, 1, 1. So my slope can also be 1 over 1. So please make sure that when we're comparing slopes, we always do the simplified slope, the one that we compare. So those lines would be perpendicular. Now they're telling me look at AB. So AB is -1 and BC is a 1. That means the lines are also negative reciprocals, so they would be perpendicular. So what would be a proper name for this figure? I would have to say it looks like a rectangle. We have 4 90-degree angles. 2 sides are longer than the other 2. So I would say that this would be a rectangle. So let's move to the other one. This one just says parallel versus perpendicular. We're going to compare. Our graph is y equals 1/3 x plus 6. They're telling me to find a parallel line, a perpendicular line, and the ones that are neither. So I can already look at this one, and I know that one's neither. So I'm just going to place it right here. I know that, what else? I think that's the only one. I know this one also here. My slope is right here. This is my slope I'm comparing it to. It's not even the same, and it's not the negative reciprocal, so I know that one's going to be a neither. That's neither. I can see right away this one right here has the same slope as mine, so I know that one's going to be parallel because we have equal slopes. Let's look at anything else that is obvious, and then we can start solving. I can also see this one right away. It's parallel because we have same slope, 1/3 x minus 8. And everything else I need to solve for y. Oh no, this one right here. I can see this one right here. It's already, the y is already by itself. Remember, I can always put the number over 1. It has opposite sign, and the 1 came down, the 3 went up, so that would be a perpendicular. It's a negative reciprocal, so that would be a perpendicular right here. So -3x equals y. Let me see if we have any more down here. Yes, we do. So you guys can go ahead and do this as practice. You can practice with the rest of them. Make sure that we can fill in all of this right here. Parallel, put all of the ones that have the same slope. Once you solve for y, put everything that is perpendicular under the perpendicular section, and then if it's neither parallel or perpendicular, we put it on the neither section. So just some extra practice that you guys can do. You guys can pause the video, solve for y, and then try to fit them in wherever they go. It's going to be a good practice for your exam. And that should be the end of it, guys.